Well, one of those signs is sexual incompatibility. Now, I know some of y'all are thinking, wait a minute, how do we know we're sexually incompatible unless we have sex? And technically, we should be waiting, right? Well, listen, number one, you don't have to have sex to discover that you two are not compatible, all right? Or that there's even a foundation for compatibility. I believe that many people have their perception of sex, it's misguided, all right? So what do I mean by that? Essentially, listen, if we would just sit and talk to each other, we could discover very early on if this can really go anywhere sexually. And we have to understand it's important to have that discussion because we can't have this mindset of, oh, well, sex doesn't really matter, it's not important. Listen, for the health of a long-term relationship, and especially specifically marriage, sexual fulfillment is very important. All right. And there's several layers. I'm going to try not to go through every single last one, but I'm going to highlight some very important ones you need to understand. All right. Now, real quick, before I get to that, sexual incompatibility. Let me give you an example. Let's just say you're a woman or a man who likes certain sexual behaviors in the bedroom. All right. You're very open sexually. Maybe you're into some kinky stuff, right? And these things are important to you. Like, it isn't just I like to do it here and there. Like, no. My sexual experiences aren't fulfilling unless I have this kinkiness involved. So now you're dating someone, you're getting to know someone, or you're getting a relationship with them. And many people, in fear of scaring off this partner or talking about too much too soon, will withhold this information. But it makes no sense because if you let it be known, I'm into that type of stuff. And that person from the jump can say, oh, hell no, I'm not with it. What are we trying to make work here? There's no way this relationship is going to succeed. It doesn't matter if you guys get along great. It doesn't matter if there is a high level of attraction. If you two are not on the same page sexually, you guys are going to now experience a huge disconnect in the relationship going forward. And that disconnect will now start to turn into other issues. So that disconnect can turn into you, that individual, going elsewhere for sexual fulfillment. So clearly, cheating, infidelity of any kind is going to now bring down that relationship. It will ensure its failure, all right? But even if you're like, you know what, I don't like this, but I'm not a cheater. I'm not going to go out there and cheat. Okay, cool. But you not getting what you feel you need and fulfilled sexually will lead to resentment, will lead to in some cases, anger, frustration. And what happens is that starts to pour into other areas. Now, when you talk to them, you may have an attitude because in reality, you're frustrated that you can't get what you need sexually. One way or another, it starts to have a huge negative impact. And again, if you sit down with enough couples, one of the things that creates a lot of problems in relationships is sexual incompatibility. Now, understand this. I'm a firm believer that the reason why sex is designed the way it is, from a biological perspective and even spiritual perspective, is because it is intended to help us bond and come closer together. All right. So it is a mechanism of greater connection, attachment, whatever you want to call it. It helps two people stick together. And let me be more specific. When the sex is great, all right? If it's bad, that's a whole different thing. But great, good sex strengthens a relationship, period. Now, for some people, it unfortunately keeps them in bad relationships or contributes to it. But when it's a healthy, good relationship and you can add great sex on top of it, oh, those two people ain't going nowhere. So knowing that it's designed for that, if you remove that from the relationship, you remove a huge piece of the puzzle that creates success. This is why it cannot be ignored. It's extremely important. So again, we've got to, I'm not saying have sex with every person you date. I'm not saying that sex needs to be of the highest priority in the relationship, but I am saying we need to make sure we are on the same page, because if we are not, that relationship is going to fail, plain and simple. Oh, and one more thing about this sexual incompatibility before I move on to the next point. I've seen so many relationships, and I have to say this, especially I've seen this with women, where women will meet a nice guy, a great guy, you really like this guy, but things are lacking sexually. Now, before I finish that point, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Let me also highlight this. I actually believe that having sex with each other too soon can in many cases actually blind you from the sexual potential in the relationship. And I say that because in many cases, and more specifically in cases where people have genuine feelings for each other, are genuinely interested, a lot of times individuals, man or woman, can get nervous, have performance anxiety. There are different things that contribute to them not being able to be fully present in the sexual experience, therefore translating into a subpar or bad experience. And people, because we live in this microwave society where they expect each other to be of a certain sexual level right away with each other, if it's lacking, that will then be used as a reason to say, you know what, I can't make it work here. When in actuality, it wasn't that it could not work, it's that it just needed some time for the person to become comfortable, for people to get better know each other, because the reality is that, listen, sex ain't rocket science here. We can learn it. We can get better. There has to be a willingness to, and there has to be a gaining of information and knowledge and wisdom about each other, what our likes are, what works, what doesn't work, so that we can make the experience a lot better. But again, people moving too fast can sometimes give a false representation. It can create a perception that things won't be good that could actually be great, but it can also create the false representation of great sex that will not last, because those two people don't have the core ingredient, which I will mention at the end of this video, the core ingredient that ensures long-lasting, high level of sex within a relationship. And so what you're seeing initially is that person's desire to put on a great performance, that person's desire to want to impress you. A lot of people want to put out their best work early on, but what they need to be able to keep that up isn't actually there. And that's why you see it fall off. So many people who get involved sexually very soon start to notice things waver off in that relationship as things go along. And some people love to think or want to believe it's because, oh, well, that's what marriage does. Marriage kills the sex. No, marriage didn't kill the sex. If anything, there was something already missing, and marriage may have more exposed that issue that was missing. But to get back to the point I wanted to add to this was, I see a lot of women meet a guy, great guy, like him, sex isn't that great, and convince yourself that, you know what, I don't want to let go of this amazing guy, this great guy, because the sex, so I'm going to hold on to him, even though he doesn't fulfill me sexually. And it might also be because, well, you haven't really been fulfilled sexually by any of the men that you've been with before, so to you, it's par for the course. I get it, but again, you got to ask yourself, can you really deal with this in the long term? And can you still be willing to pour into him sexually if you're not getting what you need from him sexually? Because that's the key. It's not about can you deal with this and still hold on to this great guy. It's can you accept this at a level that allows you to still show up for him sexually in the way that he needs you to? Because the reality is that if you are not satisfied, you are less likely to want to consistently satisfy him. And it goes vice versa. It can happen both ways, but I see it happen so much with women. And so don't trick yourself into believing you can make this work. This is why I'm saying to you, sexual incompatibility is a sign that relationship is going to fail. And you cannot overlook that, because again, it's not just about what you're willing to deal with, is can you still give him what he will need in return? Hey, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check this one out right here, and I'll see you there. I can just look at some relationships and know immediately those two people don't belong together. And sometimes looks can be deceiving, right? Not in the sense of me getting it wrong, but in the reality that sometimes it looks good on the surface, but when you take a deeper